Hi Gareth, nice to see you again. So you've moved away from Rome.
Yep.
Where are you living now? Where are we?
Just outside a little town called Amelia in Umbria, which is about an hour north of Rome. After 20 years of living in the centre of Rome, I finally convinced my wife that it was time to bolt and do something that I really wanted to do, which was live more in the countryside in Italy.
So you got fed up with the traffic in Rome, I presume?
Look, I mean, quite honestly, I got fed up with Rome. I love the city. I think it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but living in it is a lot different to visiting it, and it's very chaotic. It's a lot like many big cities around the world now, I mean, if we're honest. And so I just wanted out, you know. I grew up in the countryside in northern England, and I just felt like I wanted to get back to that,
We'll have a look around in a second,
cool.
Because, you know, you really have become the lord of the manor, haven't you? No, it's a really lovely place, and you said it's got a really nice history as well.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you some really practical things.
Go for life,
So, you know, did you use an estate agency? How did you find the place?
Yeah, this was a good one actually, because I mean, I think we all nowadays you don't want to pay estate agents anything if you can help it. And I did my searching online on things like Subito.it, and there's a new site called HomePal.it where they connect buyers with buyers, and you can try and buy. And we sort of viewed a property on that website. Nothing came of it, and the weirdest place of all that I started building, I guess, my knowledge of properties on sale was on Facebook. So I was just randomly sort of putting in homes in Umbria. That was leading me to various estate agents' websites or Facebook pages. I was liking and following those. Of course, it then started recommending more, and then I narrowed it down to areas that we wanted to live in, and it just keeps obviously feeding you more and more of what you're looking for. And eventually, I kind of have a bit of a joke, because I was sending all these things to my wife, these links, and I said it was a bit like Tinder for properties, and she was going, no, 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 no. And then I sent her the one we're in now, and she went, yes, let's go and look at it.
So were you just looking in this area, or did you have any particular town in mind or region?
No, I mean, look, the criteria for us, because my wife needs to commute back into Rome a few days a week, and so she said I don't want to be too far away. That needed to be important, and it needs to be easily connected back to Rome as well. So we were looking, sort of an hour or so outside of Rome, north really was the place, and southern Umbria. Why Amelia came on the map is because I have clients here already, and I'd said when we saw this on Facebook that morning, my wife said, "What is Amelia like?" And I went, "It's actually kind of beautiful. When you arrive, there's a beautiful Umbrian hilltop town," and she said, "Okay, well let's go and have a look at it. If you say it's so beautiful." And when we arrived, obviously she fell in love with it as well, and in the house as well, and it fit all the necessaries really for not too far away from Rome, near to the centre of town, not too isolated, and so for us it was just a perfect solution.
So you found it online.
Yeah.
Did you pay any estate agent fees in the end?
Yeah, unfortunately we ended up doing the usual. It was the 3%.
3%.
Yeah.
And did they only take that from you, or
No,
they took it?
They do with almost everybody. They take the 3% from you and the 3% from the seller as well. I mean, the estate agent weirdly is the house over there. So whether she cut a deal with the owner, the previous owner, I don't know. But my understanding is that when we looked at the rogitos and the final contract, we got a glance at the costs, and they were pretty much the same. So it was a 3-3.
And did they follow you through the whole sale? Because I remember sometimes they would cash in their percentage at the compromesso, the preliminary, and then sort of leave you on your own for the rogito. Did the estate agents follow you all the way through?
No, she followed us all the way through. To be fair, I think she was not bad, and when we had a lot of concerns, if you like, about the property, because it's an old country property with a long history to it, so we needed to do quite a bit of research. She was always very available. We got occasionally the Italian reaction of, sort of, oh my God, it's becoming a hassle for me, and that kind of, you don't want it. She's trying to sell a property that, we just understood that it's kind of a cultural trait almost. I think we were really, really lucky in one sense, because we actually needed a mortgage to buy this place. And we went to, well, that's an interesting thing in itself, is that I contacted so many Italian banks and none of them were interested in a casa in campagna, a house in the countryside. They said it's too much of a risk. They just wanted to mortgage properties in cities, apartments, etc. Anyway, eventually we talked to our bank manager in Banca Intesa, and he was from Umbria, and he said, I'll do it on the basis of solidarity.
Just to be nice.
Just to be nice. And we were like, wow, that's an interesting thing in itself.
So even if you had the financial requirements, they wouldn't give a mortgage?
Yeah, we had the financial requirements, but they would not, most of the sort of small to medium-sized banks would not touch a casa in campagna. They said it's a risk for us. We don't want to deal with it. However, coming back to the advantage of that was that, of course, when you buy a mortgage from the bank, they want to ensure that there are no major issues with it, like as they're called, the abusivo matters, somebody's constructed something that they shouldn't have done, and there are things that are not on the plans, etc. And so they went into it with a fine-tooth comb to check out everything. So we almost had a sort of a survey done by the bank, which told us all the problems, of which we used then as a negotiating tool on price and to understand all the ins and outs. Of course, over the years I've met many people who buy houses in the countryside and they don't have a bank behind them. And the estate agent, coming back to that point, is often they just don't tell you everything that you should really know. They're trying to sell the place, but they don't tell you all the little things, all the wrong things, and that are with the property, and you can end up finding out this afterwards, and then you either correct it or you live with it.
Yeah. So you're quite lucky that you needed a mortgage.
Yeah, in this sense, yeah. I mean, we got our own surveyor as well to come in and look at the things, damp and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think in this case it was probably quite an advantage. Yeah.
Do you know what the requirement is as a minimum down payment on a home?
Normally, most banks it's 20%. So 20% down payment, and then they'll give you 80% of the value of the property.
So do you think you got better value for money by coming out of Rome? Just even though it's just an hour from Rome. Was it a good price?
It was, yeah. I mean, I think for the area, it was more or less what we'd heard, that it was the going price in the area for this kind of properties. However, it has additional features, which of course we've seen, which I think give it a bit more of a story and a bit more of a presence. Lots of the locals know the property itself and talk about it, and so. Yeah, we maybe paid marginally, I'm talking about marginally over probably the asking price, really. But I think it was worth it, really.
And you needed to renovate, of course.
We needed to renovate, yeah. So thankfully it wasn't. It was bringing it back to life rather than knocking walls down and rebuilding and all those kind of things. So, and that was a criteria for us, because those kind of projects are incredibly expensive nowadays with the cost of materials, the cost of labour. It just is a huge project and massive capital is required. Here we just need to bring it back to life, plastering, repainting, fixing bits and pieces, new plumbing and a bit of new wiring, fitting in a new internet connection and things like that. We chose not to get a big firm in to one of the construction firms. We'd heard a lot of bad stories about these people. They turn up one day, they don't turn up another. They send an electrician one day, but then he has to go off to do another job of his own, and he doesn't come, and they send somebody else, and there's no consistency. So we decided in the end to hire local people, individuals, and fix them for their time, to dedicate their time to us and this project. we were quite specific in that we had a very narrow timescale. Coming out of Rome, our son was moving school, he needed to go into superior school, and we made an offer on the house in the November. We ended up purchasing in May of the following 2024, and then from May we had to be here for my son's start of school in September. So it was full on. I had to be here almost every day, helping them out and directing as well.
So talking time frames, do you think 6-month time frame from when you saw it to when you concluded that was quite quick compared to normal, or is it average?
I think that from everybody I talk to, I think that's average. I don't know. I think I've known one person in all these years who's managed to do it in about 3 months. Everybody else, particularly where you're buying a house out in the countryside, it's not just an apartment, a standard apartment in a city. Everybody's saying it takes about 6 months.
And having to wait for a mortgage, did that have anything to do with the time frame?
Yeah, I mean, that did hold us up. That held us up probably about a month. So we may have done it in 5, but that held us up with the mortgage at the bank and the organisation and authorisations and going through their whole due diligence process. That is the thing, and it's really frustrating with Italian banks. Their service standards are really not the best, and they hold things up, they don't communicate, and that's the thing, you're kind of left thinking, is it, isn't it? And it's really stressful. That for me was the most stressful part of this whole thing, but eventually we managed to get it through. So
one thing I wanted to ask you, this is your primary residence,
yeah.
So you saved a lot on taxation because of that as well. Yeah. There's this thing called prima casa, isn't there?
Yeah.
So how much do you pay in tax when you do your deeds, your rogito? Do you remember?
Yeah, so it's 2% of the catastale value of the property.
So not what you paid for it,
No.
But the calculations that they make.
Yeah, exactly. So the local authority calculable value of the property, that's what we paid on the 2%. And then there's other taxations such as the registration tax and things like that. If you were to buy it for example, as a non-resident or as a second home, it goes up to 9%. So it's a huge difference. For us, it was never going to be a second home anyway. It was always going to be our main home. The interesting thing is, a lot of people from abroad who might buy houses, buying as a prima casa, you can also do as long as you register as resident within 18 months of buying the property. So it's not like you have to do it straight away, but that, you can also buy it for the 2% as well in that kind of scenario. But for us, it was almost just a standardized process, really.
What about the notary? His fees very high?
No, I can't remember exactly how much they were. They're not based on percentage because they have a sort of a table of charges that they can make, which is given to them from the Italian state. So that's the amount they can charge on the property based on value. They also add on their extra bit for their own notarial services. And that's the bit that I always find you've got to watch out for. Is it how much extra they add on to the standard charge, which pushes it up. But he was really okay. And he was very good, I have to be honest. I've had dealings with notaries in the past and they're a bit hit and miss, but this guy, very, very efficient. Strangely enough, a guy from Rome living in Terni, which is another Umbrian city.
So if you hadn't have had to get a mortgage and the bank hadn't have done the extra surveying, would the notary have any responsibility for doing that?
Theoretically, when you do the rogito, which is the final contract, they read that out to you and they're supposed to go through all the little bits, but not everything comes out on the notarial document, the contract. You've got to do your own research. You've got to be looking at the planimetria, so the plans of the house and your land. I would suggest taking advice from a geometer or an architect. Also looking into getting some kind of lawyer involved to make sure there's no sort of legal impediments on the property as well. In our case, the only thing that the notary pulled out of the documents was it was a strange thing, but he said, do you realise there's an old stream going down under the house, which is also yours? But we haven't seen a stream, so I don't know where that is. That's the only thing that he really drew out of the documents. Otherwise, you have to do copious research yourself, particularly instances like this. houses in the countryside, because there's so many things that can pop out.
So how fundamental do you think it is to actually know the language?
Yeah, I mean, it's important. Even reading the final contract, I mean, how do you do that unless you know
So a foreigner would need a translator or a
Yeah.
notary that's bilingual,
Yeah.
I imagine.
I mean, just the estate agent that we worked with is Italian. She doesn't speak any English, but she obviously around here sells to foreigners all the time, and she uses somebody who she knows who speaks English, who helps her translate and do all the necessary requirements where there's a client who doesn't speak Italian. But yeah, either translator or a reasonable level of Italian you've got to have. Yeah.
So it seems as if for you everything went really, really smoothly. It's
Well.
quite miraculous.
Compared to a lot of people, yes, I think it did. There have been hiccups along the way, and it's not perfect. We've made some mistakes. I think the key for us was that I was here most days. I brought my laptop up, I was working off my laptop, but also at the end of the day, I was just cleaning up for the builder, you know, and sweeping around and making sure it was clean for the next day when he came in. We had a specific time scale, you know, we had to get here for when our son needed to go to school. So I had to push it, and so I had to be available for them, you know, carrying a bag of cement so that they didn't have to come down and take it up the stairs. I'd do that myself. Of course, that's not for everybody, but I think being present on site, whether you use a construction firm or whether you use individual work people like we did, who dedicate their time solely to this project, you have to be here. They have so many questions. Where does this plug socket go? Do you really want this switch to go here? Do you need to move this? Can I throw this wall down? Can we rip that out and put this near? You know, they're just constantly asking you questions, and if you're not here and you're relying on other people, it's a bit of a gamble.
So it's best to be your own project manager.
Even if you have your own architect or your own project manager working on this project, even they're going to have questions because they're going to be asked by the builder and they're going to have to ask you. So I think you need to be present for quite a big part of the project, really.
So how big is this place?
Right, well, we've got 3 hectares of land.
Gosh.
Which is a lot, 114 olive trees. We've got numerous fruit trees, and we did have a little vineyard, but that's been taken up because that was not looking too good anyway. Fortunately, about 1 hectare of that land is a wild wood, and that doesn't need touching at all, so that's okay. About another 1/2 hectare is actually managed by the local farmer across the road, and he plants his stuff on it. So the rest of it is down to me, really, and doing it up. The house itself, I don't know how many square metres it is in total, probably about 240. But with that, as you know, Michelle, we talked about it and seen it, we've got a little chapel, private, consecrated Catholic chapel.
Which you're going to show me.
Which I'll show you, yeah. And then part of that also is a cantina, so a storeroom. And then we live on a sort of a first floor, and then we've got the attic spaces, which is where our son has his room as well.
So am I asking too much of you to let me know how much you paid for it?
Okay, so we paid $420,000 for this property.
A snitch.
It would seem so. I mean, it was an absolute. The property itself just needed bringing back to life.
So it was what they call abitabile.
Yeah, absolutely abitabile. There was the son of the owner was living here. There were a couple of abusivo parts to it, but these were mainly structures that had been put up because he'd lent some part of the land out to a local person who'd come in and decided to set up an area to keep pigs and hens and things. But of course he put up concrete posts and all, just junk, essentially, if that's probably the right way of describing it. And so the bank were very adamant that all those things had to come down, any sort of, thrown up structures that all had to come away.
You probably would have got rid of anyway.
And we would have got rid of it anyway, yeah. But, in this sense, the bank authorised it. Therefore, the old owner had to get rid of it, and I didn't have to get paid to get rid of it. And that's another thing, the thing that I've realised is the cost of what they call smaltimento, so things that you want to, get rid of and dispose of. I just couldn't believe it. You ring up the guy to come and pick all up the old concrete and all the the old tiles that you've knocked out, and it costs a fortune. and then you find all sorts of loads of other junk on your land and bits of plastic and concrete posts, and it's all based on weight and what it is that they have to actually recycle or dispose of, and they charge a fortune for it. And so,
did they leave all of their old furniture as well? That seems to be a thing. They seem to leave the houses full of their old furniture because, again, it's so hard to get rid of.
It is. No, I mean, he did try. He did try, but we were very adamant that it had all got to go. And I take my hat off to the chap, an older gentleman, but he said to us, my word, these are the words he used, he said, my word is my word. I'm from an older generation where my word means something. If I say I'll do it, I will do it. And I thought, okay, I've heard that one before. But you know what? He did. He was a real gentleman, I called him. I'm still in friends with him now. He comes down probably once in a couple of weeks to have a chat.
What about the rest of your neighbours? Are you getting on well with neighbours?
Yeah. I mean, there's not been a lot of contact. Obviously, there's our estate agent who lives over here, and then we've got the local farmer contadino guy who farms the land, so I go out and chat to him. We've got a couple of other neighbours. One of the people up the road run the Neapolitans who run the pasticceria in the town, and they've got some fantastic sweets. So we've made friends with them as well. And so I don't think you can expect to move into somebody else's territory and just immediately be accepted. If speaking Italian helps loads, but also I think you've just got to slowly, sort of work your way in and become friends and show that you want to be part of the community, really.
I can see that you still have a twinkle in your eye. You see over the moon about the choice to move here.
Yeah. No, it was more myself that forced it. I was just getting tired of city life. From a business point of view, since COVID, a lot more of my business has moved online. And, being holed up in an apartment in a city centre was making less and less sense. And, for me now, I've cancelled the gym membership. Every morning my wife goes to work and my son goes to school at 7 a.m. So I just put my work clothes on and I hit the land for about an hour and a half, have a shower, and then throw myself in front of the computer. It's fantastic.
This is part of your olive grove.
This is my pride and joy now. They probably date back to the time of when the original part of the house was constructed, which we're talking about 1,600, 1,700, so we're told. And these trees could have been planted around that time, if not a little bit afterwards. But they're very old. And also we found out that they're protected in this area. You couldn't move one of these, you definitely couldn't cut one down, but if you wanted to move one professionally, you could do, but you'd have to actually ask for authorization from the local authority first, because they're considered a sort of patrimonio, as they call it, of the area.
So it's got 400 years of history.
Yeah.
And can I turn around and show everybody what we're talking about?
Yeah.
There you go. And under there, you've got something really special. So you're going to show me what's over there.
Yeah.
Let's go.
This part of the house, again, apparently there's a Don Claudio, I think his name is, a priest in Terni who knows the story of this place and knows where we can find out all the documents as well. But we haven't contacted him yet. But this was a part of or connected to an old monastery in the area, so we're told, where monks would come and pay penitence here. And if you look down on these platforms here, those are the ginocchiatoia, where they used to kneel. Unfortunately, in the 80s, when they restructured the house, they had like the indentations from all the knee impressions, but they filled them in as part of the restructuring. So it's a bit sad, but anyway. And they would come up to the windows, knock on the door here, knock on the window shutter, and then they would obviously do whatever they needed to do. But this is a private consecrated Catholic chapel, of which I'll just go in and turn the lights on. There you go.
Your own little chapel.
Our own little chapel. It's kind of special, really, to have this in your home.
It's amazing, and it's consecrated, which means you could actually have a priest in here Well, there you go. If you get fed up with working, you know what you can do here.
I'm not Catholic, but this is a special thing. I think it needs to be preserved.
It's gorgeous, yeah. So you're doing your part to preserve the history of this place, because from what I understand, it wasn't really in a good state when you got it. It was livable, but not in a good state.
No,
so
it
you've
wasn't in a
done
good state,
you've done your part in keeping it.
Yeah,
And
I think it's Italian heritage. You live here long enough. I think we all see lots of these things, but being a part of being able to look after Italian culture and history, it's kind of an honour, really, if I'm honest. I don't know if you want to see the book in the back.
let's have a look at the book.
The Messa book, which is
The Mass.
which was left to do maths, yeah. So we've got the original book here, which I'm not sure. I think it's 1886, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we'll work that out.
The Latin book. So
Amazing.
yeah, I'm quite privileged, really, and honoured, I think, to be able to look after this for whoever comes next.
So are you fully aware of what you've let yourself into with all this land? I mean, what are you going to do with all of those olive trees?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so I didn't have any clue about the olive harvest whatsoever, but it needed harvesting in October. So I contacted a couple of local people, and we did the harvest together. We have 114 trees. They brought the necessary equipment for raking the olives out of the trees, and I was tasked with moving the mats underneath and putting them in the boxes. When I get into something, I kind of like to go for it. And they arrived at 7 in the morning, and by 12 o'clock we kind of done like 45 trees. I was keeping them moving, let's say. So in two and a bit days we'd done the whole lot, and we shared the oil 3 ways. I thought it was only fair. So from 114 trees, we got 1,500 kilos, and at the resa, as I've now understood they call it, was 10%. We got 150 litres.
Yeah. The yield, it was a bad year, but the quality was supposed to have been really good this year.
Yeah, the quality's been excellent. I mean, I've always, living in Rome, we always bought and invested in good quality olive oil, and then having your own, it's just like you just go, wow, there's another level that I didn't even know existed. It really is fantastic. I mean, from tree to bruschetta, I mean, it was just something else, and we're just loving it. I mean, hey, from my point of view, from what I can understand, what I've seen today, olive trees don't need a massive amount of attention. They need looking after and pruning, which we're going to do in a few weeks. But otherwise, keeping the grass cut and managing the land is we'll see. I don't know.
So I see you've put in an alarm system. Is that because you're hyper cautious, or do you think it's a necessity?
So this area was really attacked by thieves this summer. Strangely enough, just the year that we decided to move in, and I turned 50 this year on the 30th of July, and we had our first break-in on the 29th. Fortunately, the house was completely empty. There was nothing in it apart from a piano, my son's piano. So they don't even know if they went in, because they smashed a window to get in. But immediately afterwards, on the 30th, so my 50th birthday, we called the alarm company, and we had the whole job lot installed. We also invested a lot in new windows for, obviously, insulation, but on the persiane, so the shutters in treated iron, so they're very heavy and very secure. Cost a lot more, but very safe.
So we were talking about those bonuses, the government bonuses, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So for restructuring a property now, there are quite a number of bonuses. They have trimmed back on it. Just during COVID, actually, they announced their super bonus, which was 110% of the value of the restructuring, which was it's just never worked, quite frankly. There were very few people profited from it. But actually what they've been doing now is introducing these other bonuses which you can take advantage of on X amount of spend. So one of them which we used some of was up to 96,000 in total spend on restructuring your property. They will give you 50% back over 10 years in your tax return. Of course, you need to be paying taxes in Italy to benefit from it. It's not something that you're going to benefit from if you're not actually fiscally.
And is that only a partita IVA, or if you work for a company and have a regular salary?
It applies across the board. If you've got a taxable income, whether it's self-employed income or whether it's from a income from employment, then you can offset some cost of restructuring from your property, which is a good thing. I mean, we will definitely take maximum advantage of it. And then there's other bonuses such as bonus elettrodomestici. So if you're replacing your sort of electric domestic appliances, they'll give you bonuses for that. There was another one, bonus barriere architettoniche, which is sort of if you need to do sort of big projects on the land.
For disabled people.
Yeah, exactly, and that kind of thing as well. And that one of which we won't take advantage of. But, various things. And I would recommend to anybody to look into them. If you're living here, paying taxes here, and you're going to be, renovating a property, to look into these things and make sure you take maximum advantage of it. It makes a lot of sense. Okay, you get the tax break back spread over a 10-year period, but on the sizable cost of restructuring, it can make a huge difference.
And obviously the requirements for that are also going to be that the property is totally free of any abusivismo.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
got to have all of the planning.
Got to have all the plans. And the other thing as well that we found out, and it was purely by chance really, is that where you going back to this subject of a ditta, a company. So when we had the windows and the persiane replaced, we were using what they were qualified as a ditta, a company, rather than an individual. And the same with the painter as well, although he's a local guy, but he had a company set up with a couple of other people. And where they're working at height, you need to have a piano di sicurezza, a security plan. And we've only found out at the last minute that if you don't have that security plan, then you can't claim the bonus. Because if they don't see the relative codes and identification codes from the security plan, when you put the request in for your bonus payment, then they won't give it to you. And it's just a minefield of administration and so you really need good professionals, And we were relying on a geometer who didn't know some of this information, so we had to refer to an architect and then finding bits and pieces out on the internet. So you really have to do a lot of research, and you have to get the right people on board.
What would you say to all those people who think they're just going to buy a place and flip it themselves? You can't do that in Italy, can you?
And also this, the property prices in Italy especially in the countryside, are stable. It's not I'll spend some money on it, increase its value a huge amount, and then flip it for a profit. It just doesn't happen. You're not going to really profit from it, I don't see.
And what about actually doing the physical work yourself? I don't think that's even legal in Italy, is it? If you're doing renovation work.
Well, I mean, you could do renovation work yourself. I mean, I don't think they would stop you from doing it, but it's all got to then be as they say, a norma, in line with the various rules and regulations of the Comune and Italy itself. So it'd have to be signed off by somebody. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know, Michelle. I'm sure you could do it yourself, but then I don't know how you would then go on to sell the property with all the correct permissions.